this video is not actually about our sex life. You didn't think I'd make that video, did you? Just a heads up, in today's video, I do talk about sex, and while there's nothing graphic or descriptive in the way that I talk about it, I do acknowledge its existence and wanted to give a heads up. Okay. The share of Americans not having sex has reached a record high. That's not having sex. The share of US adults reporting no sex in the past year reached an all-time high in 2018. Okay, as if that's not interesting, here's where it gets real interesting. Among the 23% of adults, or nearly 1 in 4, who spent the year in a celibate state means not, you know what that means, a much larger than expected number of them were 20-something men. Meaning that nearly a quarter of the people who reported in the last year to not having had it were actually young 20-something men. I wouldn't have thought that. All right, then they go on and they talk about other factors in the study, like how old people aren't getting it anymore. They refer to it as the Great American Sex Drought. But this is the part that I'm zeroing in on. The portion of Americans 18 to 29 reporting no sex in the last year more than doubled between 2008 and 2018. Lack of sex is driven mainly by the young. Percentage of people reporting no sex in the last year by age. Look at that orange line. 18 to 29-year-olds, it's surging. Okay, then it goes on a little bit to theorize why this is happening. It doesn't get that much into it, but it talks about how maybe people are getting married later in life, in their 30s and 40s. Sure, interesting thesis. The labor force participation among men has fallen. And it sort of suggests that if you're unemployed, it's harder to find potential partners than if you were employed. That makes sense. Okay, and then before I get into the last paragraph of that article, which is the point of this whole video, let me read you a different article that cites the same study. This one is called Young Men Having Less Sex Due to Gaming, Streaming, and Social Media. All right, and then this article ends with the same sort of suggested conclusion as the other articles. So going back to the Washington Post one, one final factor that may be affecting American sexual habits at all ages is technology. There are a lot more things to do at 10 o'clock at night now than there were 20 years ago. Streaming video, social media, console games, and everything else. And then it concludes by saying, that may speak to the drop-off among the sexually active. This should come as no surprise to you, but I have an opinion on this whole thing, and I guess this makes this video part 3 of 3 parts of Casey bitching about social media. But I don't have a resolution here. I have a thought about this. Okay, so my whole thesis on this, my whole perspective on this is really only about one contributing factor. But I think it's probably the biggest contributing factor, but this is just one contributing factor. There are myriad others. Okay, it goes like this. Before sex, typically comes intimacy. Intimacy is like a closeness, a familiarity, a comfort in being near together with another human. I think intimacy is something that we need as humans, but I think a lot of what we used to get only from intimacy has been pushed out by social media, the contact that we have on social media. Friends, before social media. Your close friends, that's like, your boyfriends, your girlfriends, your friends that you hang out with on the regular, maybe even your coworkers. People that you see on a consistent basis. Then you have tier 2, like this. Now, a distant friend is someone who's absolutely a friend, but maybe you don't see that often. Okay, now we look at friends after social media. At the core, you still have your close friends. And your distant friend group is still there as it always was. But now there's this third friend group, the tertiary level of friends. And these could be called your social media friends. So where things get gray, where things get ill-defined with this new category of friends. People used to see sometimes are sort of now lumped in with this huge category of social media friends. Social media friends, people maybe you've never actually met before in real life, or the hundreds of Twitter people you interact with, maybe someone who comments on your Instagram posts, maybe there's some Facebooking involved there, but people, actual humans that you only interact with via technology. I could probably name 50 people that I feel like I know, but I actually maybe have met once in life. I've spent very little time with, but I interact with them on the internet and they feel like real friends. And they are real friends. Whether you interact with them in real life infrequently or you interact with them only via technology, it's still human interaction, and it's still a real relationship. For me, how I would describe my own experience is that so much of this interacting I do with others on social media, which is tremendous. I interact with tens or hundreds of people every day on social media. It satiates, it fulfills my desire to interact with people outside of my immediate friend group. Not too shy to admit that, like, if I'm feeling lonely or I'm at home and everybody's asleep or whatever, I just go on Twitter and all of a sudden it feels like I'm surrounded by people having a conversation. I can reply to a total stranger who's asked me a question. That fulfills my need for human interaction. And it fulfills that need at the expense of what used to be an in real life friend group. So then what is the difference? What's the difference between people I used to interact with in real life and social media friends? And there's one difference. When I DM someone, I reply someone, I double tap someone's photo, versus even a phone call, but definitely versus seeing someone in real life. The X factor is intimacy. And I'm referring to intimacy in the platonic sense. This is not a sexual thing. I mean intimacy in the sense of closeness. When I talk to somebody on the phone, you can hear all the sort of intonations in their voice. You can pick up on little inflections. You can say, like, what's wrong? You don't sound the same. Those sorts of intimacies, I don't think they happen on social media. So, in conclusion, real life friendship can lead to intimacy, which can lead to sex, but social media friendships can equal less intimacy, which can equal less sex. Now, to speak from personal experience about the intimacy in friendships, not about the sex stuff, all humans need some intimacy. You need to be around other people. When I needed that, I would always find that with my real friends. And I can tell you now, I mean, look, marriage and kids and stuff is a part of it, but I also think because of my social media friendships, my desire to go out, my desire to see people or hang out with people is almost entirely diminished. I'm good. I feel completely connected to the world and other people largely because of social media. I think if I were to go back in time like 10 or 15 years and I lived the way then that I do now, people would think I'm like a hermit or someone who has no friends or just a crazy person, because I see almost no one ever. All right, so this is the last part in my 3-part series about my new beef with social media. And I just wanted to answer why. I don't have a problem with social media when it comes to the sex lives, diminishing the sex lives of Americans. I mean, look, to each his own. I'm in no position to judge anyone for any reason. The reason why I talk about this stuff on this channel is I find it fascinating. What's particularly fascinating to me is technology, social media, cell phones. These are ushering in a change of the way humans interact with other humans way faster than we are able to understand it. And I find the more time I spend thinking about these things, considering how they impact my life and my happiness and my brain and all of those things, the more effective I can be in how I use them, how I let them into my life, or how I don't. This morning I told Candace that I was gonna make a video today that was sort of about sex, and then I needed to get a scene with both of us in our bed. In any event, thank you, Candace, for being such a sport.